is defensive backs and who's available, who's not going to be available. And these are the veteran options that we're that we're showing right now. We'll get into more importantly the defensive prospects in the secondary in the upcoming draft, which should be our main focus in this draft is on the defense side of the football. We've covered edge, we've covered linebackers. Um, Now we're covering secondary, corner, and safeties. So not a great list here of potentially available. We don't even know if these are guys that are going to be available or not. It's going to depend on free agency and how that all that works out. If these guys even hit the open market, do they get re-signed? Are there more guys that aren't on this list that get released? We don't know yet, but this is what we have to go on right now. Not a super impressive list. Some names on here, but nothing that's screaming out like we have got to have this guy. Um, Greg Newsome that pops out as maybe the top need to have guy, but based on the trade that Jacksonville made, I can't imagine that they're going to let him hit the open market. That's just me speculating, but I really can't, especially after the season they had this year. Can't imagine that they're going to let him hit the open market, but we shall see. So, question to you, Ben, is are there any names that pop out on this list to you? Who would you want to target if all these guys do become available when free agency starts? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, so I put together based on it's a great list you put together, by the way. So thank you. I put together a short mini list of 7 names off the big list here. But you're right. This is not an all-star cast, and free agency has gotten to be very different than it was 20 years ago, or really even 10 years ago. All these teams are finding ways to keep their guys, usually by borrowing from future cap years, right? Is usually their top way to do it. But now there's fewer of the top guys that are available in free agency. You can still get guys, but my view has really gotten to be more that we are now looking in free agency for guys who raise your floor as opposed to raise your ceiling. So you're looking for a guy maybe if you were awful at CB last year, which we were, then we're bringing a guy who's just going to solidify that. He's probably not going to raise the ceiling on that and really turn it into a plus necessarily all by himself. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, sometimes you could bring in a defensive back who would boost the room immediately. So anyway, here's the 7 names. Jamel Dean, 29 years old, of course, would be coming from Tampa Bay. It's going to cost some money, but again, we've got the cap to use not everywhere we want, but anywhere we want, right? Greg Newsome, who you already mentioned, I agree. I don't think Jacksonville would trade for him and then let him go. But just in case, doing our due diligence here, gotta love the age. I love the athleticism. And then it's going to cost us some money as well. Roger McCreary is a name that I'm interested in. Formerly, I think of the Titans and now of the Rams. Still young, not a shutdown guy at all. So again, don't look for that. He's going to get beat sometimes, but he's also going to make some plays. Okay, so Roger McCreary is a guy who could step in and take over a role and do okay with it. Alontae Taylor, who I think is more athlete than cover guy, but again, you're looking to upgrade the athleticism in the room, so he would be coming over from the Saints there. I don't think he'd be as expensive. He'd be probably more in the moderate mid range price range. So again, we're getting younger. That's important. We want to get younger, right? We don't want to be the oldest team in the league. So we're looking for the guys that are 27, 28 years old, maybe 25 and 26 if we can get them. So just getting younger would help, right? Younger and more athletic. Not going to find the greatest cover guys here though, so just keep that in mind. Rasul Douglas, who where's his age at? I don't even see it on here, but
He's
he's
31.
on the list. He's 31, yeah, so he would be on the older group, but he's probably one of the better cover guys, honestly, out of this group. So again, but he would be cheaper. Honestly enough, I don't think he would be too expensive. Alohi Gilman coming over at the safety spot. Just a solid safety there. Nothing to write home about. But again, modest price would 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 solidify the safety room for us for sure. Love the intelligence there, and the last one's a guy that I know you like, so I'll steal your thunder there. It's Jaquan Brisker from the Bears. Again, I think that would be a modest upgrade over what not over what we've had, a modest upgrade over what an average safety room might look like. Brisker would be a modest upgrade and wouldn't cost a lot of money. So again, I wouldn't go signing three of these guys, but if we could pick up one or two of them, I think we have really helped to solidify the room even before we get to the draft.
I'll throw another name in there, Donovan Wilson, if nothing else, just familiarity with Dan Quinn, and if it's about the same system that we end up running
Okay.
this upcoming
Yeah.
year, that would probably be a name that is not going to be super expensive, and I'm
Right.
sure Dan Quinn trusts. He played decent ball, especially when uh Dan Quinn was their defensive coordinator over in Dallas. So I that's probably also a name to watch. Definitely wouldn't be my first pick. However, you know, it's again, it's who you know in this league, right? It's who you have
Yeah.
connections with and who you feel comfortable with, and because you're signing multi-million dollars to be with that team, that coaching staff. So you got to feel some sort of level of comfort with them if you're choosing to go there. So, um, other names on the list, maybe as a flyer, Jeff Okuda. He's still a very talented player. Just
Yeah.
definitely has not turned out to be the player that uh, that everyone's expected him to be, coming out of the NFL or out of the draft. Gosh, that was probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point. But in Minnesota with Brian Flores, should Brian Flores be our DC, maybe he can come on over, continue developing him there. I wouldn't mind him. Obviously, not going to give him a massive multi-year deal. Give him a 2-year kind of, that's like a 1-year prove it deal. See how the development uh, keeps going. I'd be more than willing to do that, even if you have to slightly overpay for a guy like that. We're talking about 10, 15 million. We're talking about maybe 4 or 5, more likely than not. Um, I know everyone's seen Benjamin St-Juste. Man, he played well. He played well in that game that we saw, that playoff game that we saw. I don't even want to entertain that, but it kind of stings when you see guys like Benjamin St-Juste, um, Cam Curl, Emmanuel Forbes that go elsewhere, and they were okay with us at best. Cam Curl was pretty decent, and they go elsewhere and they're just flourishing. It drives me nuts. Um, Not many other name. Amik Robertson, again, if you're not looking for a starter, you're looking kind of for, depth guy. He played last year for Detroit a lot when they were ravaged by injuries, and he played admirably. Again, he's not a lockdown guy by any means, but he's a guy that can at least step in and manage things. I'd be definitely okay bringing him in, on a 2 maybe 3 year deal as just kind of a backup, to guys like Amos or um Sanders Still or anything or those guys. Um, there's definitely no guys on here that I would say, yeah, that's our going to be our CB1 going forward. I don't see that guy on this list. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to turn to the draft for that. Really the only starting level safeties I see on this are Brisker, are Gilman, and then maybe a Donovan Wilson, but I don't really want to, him to. I don't feel comfortable giving him a significant amount of snaps on a good defense. On our defense, yeah, sure, he'd be probably a day one starter, but um, yeah, there's a lot of names on this. None of them are super impressive. Brisker's is probably the best one outside of Newsom on here, but you know, hopefully the defensive prospects that we're going to talk about here in a minute are a lot better, more promising.
Yeah, and it's a good group. We'll get to them here in just a minute. If you're in the audience and you're listening, and you see a name on here that you would want us to consider, want the real front office to consider, put it in the comments. We'd be more than happy to hear it because I know a lot of y'all watch a lot of football and you have opinions on some of these players too. You're right about the caliber of this group. I'll put it. I think that's a good way to put it. Is that these are not all pros or Pro Bowlers in the waiting for the most part. It's going to be few and far between to find that. But what we are looking for here is guys that can plug in and provide some real depth, whether they are your third or fourth best defensive back starter, or whether they are a rotation kind of a guy, the backup. But that is real depth. You're paying for it, but it's real depth. And I've always um, felt like fifth round draft picks are not real depth. Oftentimes you'll see that written up as in, oh, we drafted this guy for depth. Well, probably not. A guy that's drafted in the fifth round probably statistically is not going to play in his first 2 years except for special teams. Probably one. I forget the exact statistic. I think it's 10%. Basically, 10% of your fifth, sixth, and seventh round draft picks actually play any kind of meaningful snaps as starters over the years. It's not much. So usually the best you hope for is a rotation guy there. So it's just not depth. And even if it is, it's usually not depth in the first year or two. This is depth right here. Okay. This is a good group to get your depth in. And I know we're going to overpay, but I don't mind that. You mentioned Brisker and Alohi Gilman. Both of those guys could come in and play better safety than what we had last year, and they're not going to be great. So we don't expect that. But just coming in and playing some solid safety, and we're paying you to do that. That's paying you to hold down a position, and we're counting on that, and that's important. That's a real important role. So you can find that here, and then some of the other cover guys that you mentioned, like Jeff Okudah, or even I mentioned Alontae Taylor. They're more athlete than cover guy, right? It's unrealized talent. They've just never put the skill and the technique into the athleticism they have. But even those guys can flourish if you're not expecting too much out of them, right? Like you wouldn't want to put them on an island too often. But if you put them into an aggressive defense where they're allowed to make some plays, and yes, they're going to have the mistakes to go with it, but as long as they're making some big plays, that's what Emmanuel Forbes is doing for the Rams right now. He's still not a great cover guy. I don't think he ever will be, but he's making plays over there, right? The play hawk, the ball hawking, right? So if you can get some of these guys on the cheap, and they are making some big time plays along with the mistakes that they'll make, and you don't put them on an island too much, and those are reasonable expectations, and you can solidify and strengthen your defensive back room that way.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all of that analysis. I don't want to see massive overpayments. That would be the one thing,
Right.
but based on
Yes.
Adam Peters' comments from a couple of weeks ago now, probably at this point, doesn't sound like we're going to be handing many of those out. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, another thing to cover here is how much is Adam Peters allowed to spend here? That's another thing. So uh, I sincerely doubt that with new stadium that's being built, plus the over $6 billion you already paid for the darn thing just a couple of short years ago, those interest payments are probably hurting a little bit. So can't imagine Josh Harris is like, oh yeah, so we just fired two coaches that I'm still paying, and then we want to bring in two more coaches that still need to pay, and you want me to bring in players to, you know, also pay for massive guaranteed money. He's like, I don't know if I can do that right now. So it'd be
We're
interesting to
going to have
see.
on the defensive side, we're going to have 20 new 1 year contracts.
I I'm honestly, if it's another flurry of 1 year I know there's going to be some. There's going to be some in there,
There's
but
always some, yes.
if it's primarily 1 year deals, man, again, man, I don't know what we're doing. This isn't roster building. This is roster band-aids all over the
Yes.
place every single year. So
It is interesting when Nick Casario, the Houston Texans general manager, took over. The first year, he signed a bunch of 1 year deals, but as he got his draft picks in and he started adding his free agents, he moved on from that. The New England Patriots, the last offseason under Vrabel, I didn't check to see how many 1 year deals they put together, but obviously they were huge players in the free agent market and went after locking guys up for 4 or 5 seasons. I think they put at least maybe four big defensive free agents last year. So, the 1 year contracts are okay, and you're always going to have a certain amount of them, right? Matter of fact, out of the 52 man roster, you're probably always going to have at least 20 of those, but you don't want to rely on those. Those are not the key parts of your team. And so Yes, I'm with you. Now, this group here, and I know you're not either. This group of defensive backs, I don't know that there's a guy on here that I would hand a 4 year deal to, but a 2 or 3 year deal, I'm comfortable with if the age is right and if you know if the guy I like.
So let's get into guys that we do want to be here for. Hopefully, they're under 5 year deals, if nothing, or hopefully at least 4 year deals.
Right.
Um, and these are the defensive back prospects of the upcoming draft. Um, I'll be completely honest with you, I know nothing about any of these guys. So we're gonna kind of play it how we did the other day, where I'm just gonna ask you a bunch of questions about these guys. I'm gonna tell you what I'm looking for in these guys, and you're gonna try to kind of piece together what I want here. So, first though, I just kind of want your general opinion, excuse me, of this group, and of this class, for corners and safeties.
It to me, it's a very good group, and I don't see dominators here. I don't see guys that typically are just going to shut you down in one-on-one island coverage, right? But that's okay. For the most part, the NFL is not asking their guys to do that as option number one anymore, anyway, right? But this is a very good group, very deep. Uh, if you wanted to draft two defensive backs, this would be a great year to do it. It really would. So for us, obviously, we're looking at some defensive backs. This is a really good group to pull from. You know, there's guys here who can cover one-on-one in press man, right? Again, don't ask them to be Darrelle Revis, but there's legit one-on-one cover guys here. There's also some very good zone guys here. There are guys who are better at just off man, but they're very physical and smart. You know, if you're looking to just boost the athleticism, right? Maybe they're not very good at. I say this carefully because maybe they're not particularly good at one-on-one cover or at communication, but they are super athletic. You know, if you're just looking to boost the athleticism, those guys are here too. That's not exactly what I would be looking for, but again, those kinds of guys on the group. So, um, almost any flavor of ice cream you want is in this year's group, and it's very deep. Now, by the time you get to the fourth round, most of these guys are going to be long gone. So, you know, us obviously sitting there with no second round pick, we've got a first and a third. You know, we can't be sitting back there at rounds 5, 6, and 7 and hoping to pluck these guys. There are guys in rounds 5, 6, and 7. They're not like these guys, though. This is a good group here, but we are going to have to pull them in the first 2 to 3 rounds.
All right, so I'll go based off of kind of this past year and what we wanted to do, at least what appears like we wanted to do to start the year off, which was we're going to man up, we're going to play press man, we're going to try to generate some pressure. Um, Obviously it didn't work out because the players we had were not able to man up and, cover these guys one on one. So, Trey Amos actually didn't do a terrible job. I'll give
Right.
him, especially for a rookie. I don't think he did a terrible job. He was definitely up and down, but definitely did an admirable job for a rookie, being left on an island basically. So, who would be a guy that you would want to pair in that same kind of scheme where we're playing primarily press man, that you would want to pair with guys like Trey Amos and Mikey Samerstill?
Yeah, I see, and I think that's a great question, right? Because again, you can like a guy, but if he doesn't fit what you want to do, maybe that's not the guy for you, right? So, two names, they're right there at the top of the list. Mansour Delane from LSU and Jermon McCoy from Tennessee. They're both press man guys. And of course, press man guys typically are going to go farther up the list, right? They're going to get drafted higher because it's harder to do. Not as many people can do that. Uh, Mansour Delane from LSU is probably the safest one. He looks like he's got the goods. Um, he is a playmaker, but more than anything, he's a cover guy. I mean, he really sticks to a guy. Seems to have all the athleticism. Seems to be able to, that cat like reflexes, the quickness to mirror the wide receivers. It seems like he's got that. So that would be a great guy to get. Probably not at what do we have, the seventh overall pick? Is that right?
Yes, yes, seventh.
Might be a little early for him, but I mean, if that's what you need, there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just higher than what a lot of people are saying he might go. He would be more like 10 to 20, but that's one guy. Jermod McCoy is everybody, I say everybody, almost everybody's favorite press man guy. very physical, lock in, afraid of nothing in terms of covering. Often had the entire one side of the field to himself with the receiver he was covering with no safety help over the top. It was not unusual to see that. And he usually covered the best guy on the other team. The problem with McCoy is he didn't play this year because of an injury. So he missed the whole darn season. And so everybody's going to be curious to see, is he healthy? And obviously playing defensive back, does he have that speed still? Right. So huge question there with Jamad McCoy from Tennessee, but he's not going to do much in run support. It gets a little comical to be honest,
Oh
but he's
boy.
a cover guy. So that's press man right there.
All right. So say we are going to stick with what, which I hope we don't. Let's just say that we stick with the game plan of the last several weeks of this past season, where we don't play any man. We're going to play zone. We're going to play probably this cover three, soft zone, shell type of coverage. And we're just going to try to read quarterback's eyes, read the routes, and then try to jump them if we can. Just keep everything in front of us. Um, Definitely not my preferred style of defense. But who would make the most of that kind of opportunity?
I promise I'm gonna go farther down the list before we leave this group. But again, I'm gonna stick right at the top of the list for this particular question, okay? And that's Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. Okay. He can, in theory, because he did it in college. So in theory, we're expecting the same thing at the NFL level. He can own the space between the hash marks basically from about 5 yards past the line of scrimmage to about 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. So if you can imagine that rectangle, right? Hash mark to hash mark, 5 yards to 20, he can absolutely, in college, he absolutely owned that space. I mean, shutting down all the routes underneath, carrying the routes through that zone, if you will, and then moving up and run support. He's not a Troy Polamalu rock'em sock'em hitter, but boy, he just cleaned up all the run game. I mean, he largely just shut that down. So you talk about a guy who can own that space and forward. It's Caleb Downs, and his ability. I think, and I haven't studied everybody in the draft, but I think his ability to read a play and react quickly to it is probably better than anybody else in the draft. I think so. If you're looking to play that kind of a defense, that read and react defense, where you're kind of sitting there in coverage as opposed to man coverage, right? Caleb Downs is the guy. He seems to just read everything very well. And then not only does he read it, but he's quick enough to move on it very quickly. So that's the guy right there. That's the guy, if we stay at 7, that's one of a couple of guys you would be hoping to snag, would be a Caleb Downs sitting right there. But again, do we actually want to play that kind of defense?
Personally, no. For my safeties, I'm a little bit more picky. I want if I'm facing Dallas Goedert or I can't think of the Dallas tight end. Not Schoonmaker, whoever the other guy, Ferguson. If I'm facing
Yes.
Ferguson, or if we got to go face Detroit and Sam Laporta, or if Kyle Pitts is still in Atlanta, I want my safety instead of putting a linebacker on him. I want my safety to be able to match up, and even though it might be a size disadvantage, that he still has the cover skills to take him one on one. Is Caleb Downs that guy, or is there another safety on this list that better fits that kind of place down description?
Yeah, coverage wise, Caleb Downs is. No, I don't know. I don't know that. I think maybe height wise, he would struggle with the tight end thing. He can hang with all of them, and he would make life very difficult on them catching the ball. But again, I don't know that height wise that's going to be a great matchup for him. There are guys. I'll go ahead and move down to another guy here, safety Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo. If you're looking for the bigger guy who looks more like the freak athlete, it's going to be him. And he comes from a small school in Toledo, but we've seen guys like that before, and usually as long as the athleticism looks good, usually they can pick up all the nuances. So really love his physicality, love his explosiveness, love his size. So McNeil Warren's a guy that I've already seen a couple of mocks kind of try to send to the Commanders. So don't know exactly where he's going to land. Obviously, we don't have that second round pick, so we would have to either trade back, trade up, something. But that's a guy right there that would fit more probably of the style we would be looking for in our safety.
So, are there any other notable names on this list that you, as the GM of the Adam Peters lost the job, by the way, you as GM of the Washington Commanders, that you're gonna target on this list, and just say, for example, we trade out of seven so we get more picks in second and third round. Um, so you have kind of free reign here, and we need to focus on defensive backs. What's kind of your who are your targets there, if possible?
Yeah, I've got 4 or 5 names, and I'll run through them quick. If we stay at 7, there's 2 or 3 guys I'm totally fine with us sticking and picking, right? Maybe even 4 guys. They're that talented, right? But if we do trade back, let's say we trade back to 17 and we're able to pick up a real fast twitch edge rusher for the defense, but we also grab maybe pick 40, right? Pick 40 is the one I would be looking to grab some of these defensive backs here, okay? In theory. Uh, that would start with a guy like Colton Hood from Tennessee. I think Colton Hood might be the guy that makes me feel the most, that I trust the most. You talk about a guy that's physical and run support. He's smart. Um, he's fast and athletic. Now, he's not quick twitchy. That's why he's not a first round guy. So he can't press man every play, every wide receiver. But he did show the ability to press man. He plays a lot of off man, so he likes to keep the guys in front of him. And he looked good in zone too. So again, he doesn't have that uber cover skill 1 on 1, right? But he does have some of that. But I just didn't see him get beat and give up a lot of big plays. I saw some of the other guys give up big plays. Colton Hood, I didn't see much of that. You talk about a guy that I just trust to hold down the fort over there. It really would be Colton Hood. I really, really comfortable with him. Chris Johnson from San Diego State looks like a real good cover guy. Should be able to mix again. You don't want to put him on an island all the time, but should be able to mix press man with off man with zone. All right. So Chris Johnson would be a good second round pick to me. Malik Muhammad from Texas, again, good athlete. Don't ask him to be a cover one guy, but just upgrading the room there. And then if we were to pick 2 defensive backs, right? Let's say we pick one of the names I mentioned in the second round, and now we're sitting down in the late second, early third round, maybe. If a name were to slip to us like a D'Angelo Pons or Chandler Rivers, obviously not as talented and a little bit smaller, but these are guys who look like they can hold their own. They've got plenty of speed. Pons has more speed than Rivers, but Rivers has longer arms. And these guys look like they can move to different positions. You wouldn't want them always on the tallest wide receiver, but they look like they can move from wide CB to slot. So those would be 2 guys right there, and Will Lee as well from Texas A&M. It really is a good group here. So again, if we're looking to solidify positions, this is a great group to do it with.
Well, it sounds like regardless whether we stay at seven, whether we trade back, regardless of where we pick in the second and third rounds, um, that there's options at every level, and options that you would feel comfortable with as a GM. That I honestly, at this point, just get some bodies back there, hopefully capable bodies at this
Right.
point, but worthwhile picks. You don't want to just make a selection just for the sake of making one. Um, so I feel confident based on the list and based on your analysis of all these guys that, if we target defense early and often, which hopefully first, at least 2 of the first 3 selections, I think should be defensive
Right.
oriented. Hopefully we get secondary addressed, and I'd be happy with any one of these guys.
I'm in the same boat. I didn't even mention some of these names, but they're almost all worth. They have some value in some way. And and I understand as we go through this off season, because we say this every year, you put together a plan, but the plan doesn't always fall in place. Sometimes the free agent you targeted signs somewhere else. Sometimes the defensive picks, draft picks that you wanted are already gone by the time it's your turn to pick. Sometimes the trade that you were trying to put in place just doesn't quite offer you enough value that the team just won't quite give you what you need. And sometimes it's your turn to pick, and the player you love isn't at a spot you need, so you just can't pass the guy up. Things don't work out crisp or clean in most off seasons. But as we're putting together a plan here, I would love to sign one or two of those free agents that you had on the list. And then I would love to draft two of these defensive backs here in an ideal world.
Yeah, now you got a brand new defensive back room, so I would totally love that.
Yes, to go along with Trey Amos, it would be, I would feel very satisfied that we had done a good off season of work if that were the case.
All right. Anything else regarding any of the coordinator positions that we talked about, any of the defensive prospects, anything at all?
Yeah, just that I man, I'm going to be bothered if we don't bring in a defensive coordinator that I'm excited about. There's enough
Yeah.
names out there. If we go if we go fishing and we don't come up with a name I'm excited about, I'm going to be a little disappointed about that. All right. So obviously somebody's going to fill the spot, but man, there's enough good names out there. We should be able to get one we're excited about. I really do feel that way. So we'll see.
Yeah, we shall. Like I said, I don't anticipate anything happening like tomorrow or anything like that. I say that and then news will break first thing tomorrow morning. But um please make sure you're subscribed to Pro Football Enterprises. Make sure you have notifications turned on to get updates on everything that Ben posts on this channel. It is truly some great content. I don't have an updated playlist here for your latest videos, but if you want to give the audience kind of a preview of what you got uploaded or what you got in the pipeline that we're going to be uploading here soon.
Yeah, from now until the middle of, well, 2 weeks before the draft. That's basically when our cutoff is. We're basically going to be trotting out two prospects a week. One of them will usually, the offensive one will usually show up here on Pro Football Enterprises, while the defensive one will show up on Box Score Network. So we've already got up about 40 prospects between the two networks. We're going to trot out about another 30 to 40 before the draft gets here. So if you want to learn about these guys, at least our opinion of these guys, it's all coming. And it's the top names. It's the names everybody wants to know about. So we'll mix in a couple of the lesser knowns, but for the most part, it's the top names.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. Again, make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you all next week. Probably more prospects that we will be analyzing for, who we take at 7. We might even throw a quick mock draft in there. So, a lot of good stuff coming down. Make sure you stick around.